Hello, everyone. Whether you're an established or budding restorative practitioner, my name is Trisha Tinsley, and I'm here with Beth Smull to briefly share some of the powerful and challenging aspects of listening circles. Both Beth and I have worked on the curriculum for our listening circles training. So I'll just pass it over to Beth to kind of get us started with the conversation.
Great, thanks, Trisha. Again, my name is Beth Smull. I am a lecturer on the faculty here at IIRP, and I'm thrilled to be having this conversation with Trisha. What we're going to do today is just answer a few questions and hope that you enjoy the conversation. If you are interested in listening circles or learning more about the process, we did post a long form interview on the site, as well as a few handouts. So the first question we're going to take a look at today is, what is the power of listening and the listening circle structure? So Trisha, I'll have you start this one.
Yeah, and so Beth and I have had a lot of conversations around listening and listening circles, but I think that especially now, to kind of go macro, we're really in a situation where we're kind of at the head of a lot of different crises. So there's like this racial reckoning here in America. There's also like climate change. There's a lot of things going on. And one of the things that really has occurred to me is that we have a lot of solutions. What we don't have is enough listening, meaning that I don't think that we can actually find our way out of a lot of our current crises, which are very important. Like we can't, they refuse to be pushed under the rug anymore. Let's just say that. And without having some kind of structure or even listening is really the only solution in my mind. Mm-hmm. Because imagine all of the things that we do that will allow us to actually understand enough to kind of find a solution. So I think that people really underestimate the power of listening, and listening just for the sake of listening. And in a lot of ways, when you think about our current climate, the structure of a listening circle can really be that avenue that allows us to get through understanding the real problem, right? The complexity of the problems. And if you think about it, imagine listening circles being implemented everywhere. They may not even be necessary in the next decade or so if we build this culture around listening. So that's something that I'm really passionate about, that's really come to my mind. So what about you, Beth?
Yeah, Trisha, I agree with, so much of what you said. I think just a few things I would add to that conversation as far as the power of listening circles is this process, the structure of it, really kind of forces you to listen for understanding and not to respond, right? So it doesn't become a back and forth in a dialogue. It's a series of circle rounds, and we come to that space, and we just have a different perspective. And it is about just hearing someone, even if you don't agree. We ask people as they enter into that space, we ask them some reflection questions around, are they prepared to listen? Are they prepared to listen to folks they might not necessarily agree with? So I think that that's a really powerful piece. The other powerful piece is, as you said, we have a lot of solutions, but in this process, we don't have to talk about them. There's a time for problem solving. And oftentimes that happens after this, or we can set up another process from a listening circle. But in a listening circle, we aren't expected to have the answers. We aren't expected to problem solve. We're asking, again, to listen for understanding and just talk about what's going to happen for you next, right? What's one thing you can do in your control? What's one thing you want to learn more about? So I think it also, that power of building agency in individuals and in groups is so important in this work, in this structure. So that's what I think.
So I love your answers, especially when you use the word agency. I love that word. But now think about, on the flip side, in your experiences, Beth, what are some of the challenges of listening circles, either training them or either being actually facilitating or being in a listening circle. So all of the above.
Yeah, great question, Trisha. And again, the challenge is usually where we learn the most, right? It's usually where we're pushing ourselves beyond what we may be prepared for, beyond what we think we're capable of. And I think that's one of the challenges. I think fear for folks that I don't know if I can have this conversation. I don't know, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I make a mistake? Will other people judge me? And we talk a lot in the training, right, about brave space versus safe space. And one of the things you always say, Trisha, that is one of my favorite quotes in the world is safe doesn't mean comfortable. So we can still create safe spaces, but push those boundaries. But yeah, a challenge is definitely fear of the topic, especially when we're talking about things like race and politics, religion, right? The things we're kind of conditioned or taught not to talk about. So I think that's a fear, and also confidence. I've seen that in training, and yeah, I see you nodding, so I'm sure that's something you come up with, come up against a lot too. Whether that's confidence as a participant to be okay to say what's on my mind, but also confidence as a facilitator. What if something goes wrong? What if people don't uphold the norms or the agreements? What if people cross the line? So I think fear and confidence or lack thereof. So what about you, Trisha? What are some of the challenges you're encountering?
Yeah, I think that I love that you bring up confidence, because one of the things that I know is that I feel like people don't really trust themselves with this process. And I'm not entirely sure where that comes from. I think there's a certain sense of like this process, the structure feels very limiting and foreign to people. Now, keep in mind, just for the record, we do have a script that we teach people to use a listening circle so that you can really hold the space for what could be difficult topics. Mm-hmm. But I notice also that, so there's a lack of confidence. People don't trust themselves with their voice or to be able to guide people through this process. Also, there's a lot of resistance to just listening for listening's sake. I really don't know where that comes from. People are just like, no, that's not going to work. And they want to put a lot of rules and extra bells and whistles around it, as opposed to just sitting with somebody and just listening, and for no reason. In addition, I get a lot of pushback from to the structure. Mm-hmm. And people are just like wanting to like say, we need to be more casual, we need to be more casual. But in our work, the higher the level, the topic and the difficulty of it, you need to match that with structure so that you can actually hold the space. And people are really resistant to it. I haven't really figured it out. I have some thoughts about it, but it's very challenging. It's just like with any of restorative practices, there's a buy-in aspect that you really need to enroll people, not convince, but enroll people about what benefits there are, or that we can actually do this. This is actually productive. So those are some of the challenges that I'm still struggling with, not in training and in doing facilitating circles. So.
Great, thanks, Trisha. I really appreciate how you talked about the structure piece, as well as this being an opportunity for people to share and get support, right? And I think we do, thinking of this as a with process, we always want to make sure that we're matching that level of support with the structure piece. So I think that's also important to know. So our last question that we wanted to explore here is, what are some lessons learned, for you over these past, 2.5, 3 years with this process, and or where do you see the future of listening circles?
I do think that it should be a process, whether someone takes the process that we've developed or modifies it, or some kind of structure that is happening at every juncture of change, right? So anytime that there is something that's pushing us in our community, I think listening circles should be implemented. I do think that some of the lessons learned, most important thing is that you really need to co-create here. This is not something where we're seeing the hierarchy shine, and it doesn't even have its place here. So hierarchies work in some situations, but here it doesn't really work. There needs to be a leader or somebody who's kind of responsible for guiding people, but it really is a community focused thing. Not only do you need to respond to the community and ask the community what they need, like what's important to them, but also when you're developing the questions to ask people, when you're bringing people together, what do we need to know? And that to me is something that, as well as just kind of sitting and listening for listening's sake, people are not always used to doing and therefore don't trust it. You know, when you're not used to something, it's uncomfortable. And so you're just like, it's not going to work, but it does work. I've been to a lot of community forums and had very communal conversations. I've been in cultures that only talk communally, and it works. So I think that's my biggest lesson learned. The other lesson learned is to watch your body language. Because even I'm watching us sitting here and doing all this nodding and stuff. You never know who you're going to, because it basically, I've learned in listening circles, if you nod too much, it shows someone you agree with somebody more than it does someone else. So just want, and also if you're listening really hard like me, I tend to furrow my brow. And so it looks like I'm angry or disagree. So you have to really watch that body language, not hide it, but just know that it has an impact on others. So Beth, what about you?
Great. Well, I'm nodding in agreement because I do agree, but I'm so appreciative that you pointed that out. One thing you said that I would like to just expand on a little bit, and that was about co-creation. We've sat down on many occasions with a much wider circle to talk about topics, to talk about questions. One of our colleagues has always said the world will tell us what the next topic should be. So I agree. I think listen to your community, pay attention to your community. That's certainly been a lesson, as far as when we're picking topics. But what has certainly been a very important lesson for me is to not write questions or come up with topics alone. And making sure that you are including a diverse group at the table. This was very evident to me when we started to explore the topic of race after the murder of George Floyd. I thought to myself, or kind of had that moment of, I can't, as a middle-aged white woman, be the only one coming up with these questions. I have no idea, what it's like to to walk in someone else's shoes in that community, right? So making sure we had a lot of voices at the table. And also knowing your audience, another lesson learned, myself and another facilitator were coming up with questions around the topic of political divide. And this was happening in January of 2021. And our listening circle was happening a week after the insurrection at the Capitol here in the US, and before the inauguration of a new president. And we thought about changing the questions or changing the topic to focus specifically on what happened on January 6th. And then we had that moment to think, wait a second, who's coming to this, right? And it wasn't just US citizens. There are people from all over the world who are coming to engage on the topic of political divide. And it was really important for us, again, to widen that circle, to think beyond, just ourselves and our, where we live in the world. Political divide in other countries around the globe isn't about, the 2020 election here in the States, right? So again, lessons learned for me were really about getting the right voices at the table, that co-creation, like you mentioned, paying attention to your community for topics, and widening the circle for questions.
So yeah, Beth, I think that one of the things you bring up that's really amazing is this idea of just really getting that input, especially when it comes to your topics and the questions that you ask. So thank you for listening to our conversation today. I know we went back and forth, but it's still something that are points that we wanted to make. You can find our information in the write-up with a lot that goes along with this video. and take care of yourself and reach out to us if you have any questions, concerns, or ideas. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Trisha, and thank you all who watched and listened. Have a great day.